I'm going to be giving my initial impressions of Last Epoch, and I'm going to be comparing some things to Path of Exile, because the Steam reviews were saying you should play this instead of the most recent update to PoE, so I'm going to compare what stood out to me the most. First thing is graphics, which is by far the least important thing, but it's instantly noticeable. Last Epoch just looks better. The environments, the mobs, and the character all look great, and it's better because it costs $35 as opposed to Path of Exile, which is free. The biggest difference between Last Epoch and PoE is definitely in how skills are handled. PoE skills come in the form of gems that need to be socketed into armor, and you have skills that can modify them, which needed to be linked together in order to take effect. A fairly complex system for what's essentially your main way of interacting with the game. In Last Epoch, you simply get skills at certain levels and can equip them whenever you want. In order to upgrade skills, you have to select the ones you plan on using and specialize in them, which gives you a skill tree with branching paths for each skill. It's much simpler to understand while still allowing for some complexity, although not as much as Path of Exile. One of the other biggest differences between the games is how many skills you can have equipped at once. PoE allows you to have 8 active skills, whereas Last Epoch only lets you have 5. Now, that doesn't seem like too big of a difference, but it has pretty massive implications for gameplay. Both games have movement-type skills, which are almost essential for traversing maps quickly, and what that means is that in PoE you have 7 slots you can use for either buffs or attacking skills, but in Last Epoch you only have 4, if you plan on using movement skills, of course. And so, Last Epoch has lower density groups of mobs compared to Path of Exile. Maybe that changes later on in the game, but I have a feeling it won't be as drastic as PoE, and it makes sense because you have less tools available to you, given the smaller amount of active skills that you can actually use. Another difference is in potions. Path of Exile has a lot of different potions that give you various different effects. You've got health and mana potions, quickness potions, that type of thing. And Last Epoch only has health potions. They don't even have mana potions. And what this change does is put a lot more emphasis on crafting armor and weapons, because you can't supplement stuff like resistances and movement speed with potions like you can in Path of Exile. Speaking of crafting, both games function very similarly with how they approach loot. Both use a prefix and suffix system where you can only have a certain amount of each, and only certain bonuses can fall under each category, like resistances, damage bonuses, extra skill effects, and so on. Also, each prefix and suffix has a tier, which limits how much of a resistance, for instance, it gives within a certain range. So maybe you get physical damage resistance at tier 1, and it has a range of 1 to 5%. And tier 2 increases that from 5 to 10%. And where it falls within that range is random. You can improve the tier and reroll to try to get a better percentage, or change it out for an entirely new effect. There are also unique items in each game with unique effects. I know that in PoE there are ways to reroll them and add new stuff to them. I'm not sure if Last Epoch is the same. I haven't really gotten too far in the game yet. And finally, there is the skill tree. Last Epoch has a very simplified skill tree that's easy to understand and has a similar system to Path of Exile's Ascendancy, where you can change how the class you're using plays. I haven't gotten to the point in Last Epoch where I have been able to do this, so I'm not going to talk about it. I've enjoyed my time with Last Epoch, and I'm curious to see what else it has to offer, and if it can achieve a similar level of complexity that Path of Exile has. So far, it's much simpler and easier to get into than PoE. I mean, in Path of Exile, the first time you open the skill tree, it makes you just want to turn the game off. And there hasn't been anything I've experienced so far that has overwhelmed me like that. But anyways, that's all I wanted to say.